This is TTT Live. I'm Vidya Ramphal. The Ministry of Health is giving an update on the status of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago. We are bringing you live coverage on TTT, Talk City 91.1 FM, Sweet 100.1 FM, Next 99.1 FM, and on Facebook at TTT Live Online. We go now to Minister of Communications, Donna Cox.
Good morning and welcome to today's virtual media conference to apprise you of government's efforts to combat COVID-19. We want to let you know that on Wednesday, our media conference will be held at 2 p.m. Today with me are the Minister of Health, the Honorable Terence Dialsing, the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram, and Dr. Christine Carrington, Professor of Molecular Genetics and Virology, and Head of the Department of Preclinical Sciences, Faculty of Medical Sciences, University of the West Indies. The Minister of Health, the Honorable Terence Dialsing, will provide an update on COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, my colleague and friend, the Honorable Minister of Communications, Donna Cox. Good morning to the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram, and Professor Christine Carrington, who is here this morning to talk about vaccines and coronavirus. And I hope the opportunity is taken to really ask a lot of questions this morning on that very important topic. So where are we with coronavirus in the region, in the world? So as of today, there are 7,127,052 cases around the world. We have crossed the 7 million mark. That's a large number of people. Unfortunately, the number of people who have died has now crossed the 400,000 mark. It's at 406,847. Over 400 individuals have died of coronavirus. It means hundreds of thousands of families have been affected and touched in a very significant way. People are now without loved ones, without mothers, fathers. A couple families have lost 2 or 3 people to coronavirus. We in Trinidad and Tobago have escaped that sort of grim reality. Whilst 8 persons have died, and we do condole with their families, it could have been so much worse. To date, globally, 3,479,449 persons have in fact recovered, and this pandemic is now affecting 213 countries and territories and 2 international conveyances, which are mainly confined to being cruise ships. Sorry, I did forget to tell ladies and gentlemen of the media, good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and to the listening and viewing public. When we first started to give these statistics globally, the caseload per million around the world, which is a useful comparator, was about 120 per million. As of this morning, it is now 914.3 per million. That is showing the exponential rise in the number of cases per million. As we continue this morning in the accelerated reopening of the economy, it becomes even more crucial that the public continues to accept the baton that has been passed to them, to engage themselves in a meaningful way to apply all the necessary public health measures to reduce your chance, your family's chance, your children's chance, your grandparents' chances of getting coronavirus. The reason for emphasizing these public health measures is this. Without calling specific countries, there's one country in the CARICOM region that has seen a spike in cases from May 16 to June 4th. In May 16, there were 100 cases, and in 3 weeks, it spiked to 2,600. that is a frightening statistic, and that is close to us. In South America, the virus shows no signs of abating. The reason for referring to these three territories which are close to us is to emphasize the point, because people keep asking me since an unfortunate public statement was made. A very unfortunate public statement, which if people listen to it, will lull this country into a false sense of security. And that is, it has nothing to do with sunshine. It has nothing to do with temperature. Please disabuse yourself of that rather uninformed, unintelligent statement that was made, which was supported by persons who should know better. Sunshine will not save you. Heat will not save you. What will in fact save you are the public health measures, which are washing of hands, use of sanitizers, the wearing of this simple piece of cloth with two pieces of elastic called a mask, and wear it properly to cover your nose and mouth. Not like this. Wear it like this. As we open up the economy more and more, it means more and more people are moving. As people move, what will move with people? The virus. The virus moves with people. So to interrupt the transmission of the virus and to lessen the chance of person-to-person contact, these simple measures, which aren't going to cost you much. You could make your own mask or buy one for as low as $10 that I have seen on Independence Square, $20, or make your own mask. Walk with your hand sanitizer. I am again appealing, as we open up the economy more and more, that companies, organizations, businesses, small, medium, and large, please enforce the no mask, no service policy. And it is not good enough to just have a sign up saying no mask, no service. Because I went to fill gas in a gas station, walking up to the teller who is behind glass, I saw the sign, no mask, no service. So when I see the signs, I feel good. I say, aha, the message is getting through. No mask, no service, you can't get gas. I went up, I paid my $200, Minister Cox. And as I was walking away, the man behind me had no mask, walk up, and he got gas. So the advice to people and store owners and business people, having the sign up is nice, but we really have to live the policy. And these simple public health measures will help us keep this country as, you know, I don't want to use virus-free because we are not virus-free. We can't make that claim. But as free from the calamitous positions that other countries have found themselves in. So, Minister Cox, I just want to close with that plea to business owners and to persons wherever they are to live the mantra, no mask, no service. Thank you very much, Minister Cox.
Thank you very much, Minister. At this time, the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Roshan Parasram, will provide us with a clinical update.
Hi, good morning, Honorable Ministers,
Good
members
morning.
of the media, members of the viewing and listening public, Professor Carrington. The number of samples submitted today as of 10 a.m., that is the 8th of the 6th, 2020, are 3,409. Number of repeated tests thus far is now 508. Number of unique patient tests completed, 2,901. Number of positives remain at 117. The number of discharges go up to 109. So the patient at home of football received their second negative test, making them meet the medically discharged criteria. However, the patient was offered to leave, but decided to stay with their family members until their discharge, which would be in a couple of days once they receive their final negative test. In terms of the parallel system, therefore, we have a total number of 39 persons left in the parallel system at this point. our 52 returning nationals from the Disney Fantasy Cruise would have been discharged starting this morning and complete by the end of today, leaving in Cascadia 2 persons, in the Tacarigua facility 29 individuals, and healthcare workers at Napa 5. At the home of football, we remain at 3 individuals. So, Minister Cox, that's my brief summary this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parasuram. Dr. Christine Carrington, Professor of Molecular Genetics and Virology and Head of the Department of Preclinical Sciences, Faculty of Medical Sciences, University of the West Indies, will provide an update on vaccine development for COVID-19. Dr. Carrington.
Thank you, Ministers and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Parasuram. Good morning to the members of the media and to the viewing public. Now, an effective vaccine against SARS-CoV-2 is likely to be the only long-term solution to controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, there are over 125 vaccines in development, and 11 of these have reached the stage of clinical trials, meaning that they're being tested in humans. Now, vaccine development is a long, complex process involving preclinical laboratory studies, animal studies, then several levels or what we call phases of clinical trials involving vaccination and subsequent challenge of people with the virus. And if a vaccine is proved to be safe and effective after all of this, then there are difficulties transitioning to manufacture. It's a difficult transition to manufacture. That manufacture has to be on a large scale, it's done under very strict conditions, and then finally you move to distribution. Now, on average, all of this normally takes, on average, will take about 10 to 15 years. However, for COVID-19, private and public entities have been working together in an unprecedented manner to speed up the process. Even at this accelerated rate, many experts believe that it will be about 18 months before a vaccine is ready for rollout. The most optimistic believe that one of the vaccines that's currently in trials, in clinical trials, will be ready before the end of the year. Now, before I say more about this vaccine and other front runners, I want to explain what vaccines are, how they work. But before we move there, we have to understand how our bodies fight germs like bacteria and viruses. So, when a germ invades the body and begins to multiply, this is called an infection. Some infections cause illness and some are deadly. The main job of the body's immune system is to recognize invaders and to fight them off before too much damage is done. When the immune system wins, we recover from the illness. Now, our immune systems use several tools to fight infections, and each type of invader requires a slightly different set of tools. So the first time we encounter a particular virus, it takes several days for our immune system to size up the invader and then make and use the right set of tools needed to clear that infection. Now, during that time, serious and sometimes irreparable damage can be done, and also we may spread the virus to other people. So, even if our immune system wins the battle and we recover, the war is not over, because the virus has moved on and is still spreading in the population. Now, the good news is that after an infection with a given virus, the immune system remembers what it learned about how to protect the body against that specific virus. So, if it encounters the same virus again, it can go into action much more quickly and prevent the infection from taking hold, or at least prevent it from causing illness or from spreading to other people. This is what we mean when we say someone has developed immunity to a particular virus. For some viruses, that immunity lasts a lifetime, while for others, it might only be a few months to years. So vaccines now are biological preparations that train the immune system to recognize and combat specific germs. A viral vaccine will typically contain a component resembling the disease-causing virus. It is the same virus it is training the immune system to recognize. So this component may be a weakened or inactivated form of the target virus, or it might be one of the target virus's proteins, or it might be a totally different, it might be genetic material from the virus it's targeting that once it's delivered into a cell will allow that cell to make the proteins belonging to that virus. Or it can be a totally different harmless virus that has been modified, so it carries some of the proteins from the target virus or the genetic material needed to make those proteins. Now, whatever the type, when a person is vaccinated, their body thinks it's been invaded and an immune response is triggered. Now, because the vaccine looks like the disease-causing virus, the tools that the immune system produces and remembers for the future will be effective against the real disease-causing virus. So, if they encounter that virus later on, the immune system will immediately recognize it and mount an aggressive attack before the infection can take hold, or at least before it can cause illness or spread to others. So, of the COVID-19 vaccines in clinical trials right now, one of the furthest along is AZD1222, developed by Oxford University. It used to be called ChAdOx-NCoV-19, the ChAdOx-NCoV-19 vaccine, and it is a weakened version of an adenovirus. It's a type of common cold virus, and this one that they've used causes infections in chimpanzees. And they have modified it so that it cannot multiply in human cells, but they've modified it so it can make SARS-CoV-2 proteins. It makes a specific protein called a spike protein. Now, initial human trials showed that it is safe and well tolerated and that it triggers a strong immune response that is able to recognize SARS-CoV-2. Animal studies showed that although vaccinated animals can still be infected by SARS-CoV-2, the level of virus is lower than in unvaccinated animals, and the vaccinated animals did not develop pneumonia. So there's some level of protection. Now, a phase 3 clinical trial involving 10,000 UK volunteers will now test whether people who receive AZD1222, the vaccine, are less likely to get infected by COVID-19 or to develop symptoms than volunteers who are given a non-COVID-19 vaccine. The results of that study are expected in August, but with COVID-19 transmission slowing down in the UK, there is the issue of whether enough people will get exposed to the virus in order to tell if there's a difference between the two groups. Now, and also, even before those results are in, with the support of a non-profit coalition called the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations, the company AstraZeneca is going ahead with preparations to produce 2 billion doses of that vaccine, including 400 million for the US and UK and 1 billion doses for low and middle income countries. If the vaccine is proved to be safe and effective, the first doses are anticipated to be available later this year, and the first 300 million ready by July next year. So there's a lot of ifs in between, but they're moving very rapidly. Another company, CanSino Biologics in China, has developed a similar recombinant adenovirus vaccine that has been shown also to be well tolerated and to produce an immune response, but again, we don't know yet if that immune response is protective. And the last one I want to mention is from a company in the US called Moderna, and their candidate vaccine called mRNA-1273 consists of a little snippet of SARS-CoV-2 genetic material packaged into lipid nanoparticles, a very small sort of oily bubble. And phase 1 trials showed that it was safe, it produced an immune response, and that some of the vaccinated people produced antibodies that could neutralize the virus. They are now moving to phase 2 trials with 600 volunteers to look more closely at safety and to better understand the nature of the immune response produced by that vaccine. So the take home is that there's a lot in the pipeline. Things are progressing at an unprecedented rate, but there is still uncertainty and a lot of work to be done. Even if phase 3 trials identify a safe and effective vaccine that goes into production this year, it is likely to be 12 to 18 months before it will be ready for wide administration. So until then, we have to rely on trying our best to avoid virus entering the country. We need fast and efficient testing and tracing. If it does appear, we need to continue that. And we also need to rely on maintaining the new norm of physical distancing, hand, sneeze, and cough hygiene, and wearing masks. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive,
Excellent.
that information is
Excellent.
good, Minister. Very good information. Members of the media, the floor is now open. Remember to identify yourself and the media house you represent before posing your question. We want to give as many of you an opportunity to pose questions to us, but that means in our limited time, we will have to give each media house a chance to get a maximum of 2 questions in. Once we have completed the pool and time allows, I will come back to you. So let us keep this in mind as we begin taking your questions. 91.9.
Hi, good morning to the panel for the Extavour 91.9 FM. Just 2 quick questions. I wanted to just get some clarification on the churches and when they will be able to resume having their services. There are some persons that sent me some information saying that they have information that they could carry on the Corpus Christi observances for the Catholic side of things on Thursday. And I also wanted to just get some insight. Minister Cox, if you could find out some insight. I got a request from one listener in Tobago saying that they were uncertain about the food card top-ups they were supposed to receive. And they wanted to know if they needed to reapply and what was the process. They were of the assumption that the top-ups would have been automatic once they've gotten the initial temporary cards.
Okay, thank you. I will check on that information and get back to you as soon as possible, hopefully before this press conference is finished.
Okay, on the issue of places of religion are allowed to start back their religious practices from this Thursday, regardless of religious persuasion. So this Thursday. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. ACP News.
Hi, good morning. Priya Bihari, azpnews.com. Professor Carrington, when a vaccine is developed, how long you think it would take to reach our shores? And secondly, how long you think it will take the population of Trinidad and Tobago to be fully immunized with that vaccine? And secondly, to the Minister of Health, recently, Minister, you spoke about the 877 well number that doctors there are going to be trained to deal with the mental health issues. Have they been trained? And can you tell me what sort of calls and numbers you all are getting on that line now?
Okay, so I will take the second part first. Yes, 877 well has been operational for over 2 months now, CMO. Yeah. We initially had about 10 doctors trained, and then we bumped that up to 18. And as for the number of calls, I don't have that number now, but my Corpcom person is here, and she will check and probably give it to you during the course of this broadcast. Dr. Carrington.
Dr. Carrington.
Thank you. So you asked about if a vaccine is developed, how long it would take for it to reach our shores, and once it's reached our shores, how long will it take to immunize the whole population? So that's a difficult question. The getting a vaccine from a manufacturer to out to the person who needs it is a long process. How long a COVID-19 vaccine would take to get to Trinidad would depend on the rate at which it's produced and how much is produced. That's why we're actually hoping that several of the vaccines that are in clinical trials actually make it to the end, because then you'll have a larger number of companies in a larger number of countries actually producing different vaccines that can get out there. What I can say is that there is a concerted effort to put processes in place to allow a rapid dissemination of the vaccine to both developed and developing countries. And the pharmaceutical companies involved have committed, some of them have committed to doing that at cost during the pandemic period. So the vaccine any vaccine is expected to be widely dispersed as fast as possible. How long it takes when we get to Trinidad, that is not something that I can answer. That's probably an answer that could come from the Ministry of Health. You have to understand the healthcare system and things. So that's not something I would be able to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you for ping-ponging that to me, Dr. Carrington. But the question raised is a very valid question. And I'm going to answer with a question and with a solution. The question has to go back to Dr. Carrington. Dr. Carrington would have said it takes about 10 to 15 years under normal conditions to develop a vaccine. The world is trying to develop a vaccine in short space of time. So the question to Dr. Carrington is, what is the trade-off between speed, efficacy, safety, because as a policymaker sitting in the chair of the Minister of Health, I always refer to the fiasco that happened in Philippines, where Dengvaxia was approved to vaccinate the Philippine population against dengue, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people died because you post what they call the after phase 3 of a vaccine development, you have something called post-market surveillance. This is where you unleash the vaccine on a general population for the first time, and it's then you really see the parameters of safety and effectiveness. At a recent WHO assembly about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the African Union, led by, I think, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, he actually raised the issue that if any COVID vaccine is developed, it should be patent-free. In other words, the company that develops it, or the university and the company consortium, the idea thinking now from the African Union is that no one should hold a patent, which means it can be more widely available globally. And the African Union also, at that meeting, advocated for the vaccine to be made available free of charge to countries around the world. So those are two important interventions by the African Union at the recently concluded WHA assembly. How long it will take to reach here, no one can give you an answer at this point in time. So, Dr. Carrington, sorry to put you on the spot, but could you explain to the population the trade-off, if any, between safety, efficacy, and speed of development?
Thank you, Minister. So, as I mentioned earlier on when I was speaking, vaccines normally go through a long process of in making them, in testing them, and then checking them at different levels of clinical trials to see if they're safe, if they actually work, etc. And what normally happens is all those stages occur one after the other. So you complete one stage and you move to the next. You get the right approvals and you're approved to move to the next stage. And during the clinical trials, you're moving up from small studies with a few people in a very controlled conditions, where you observe them very carefully. Then you move to slightly larger groups. And then you have what are called phase 3 trials, where you have very, very large, like thousands of people who have volunteered to be tested, etc., and they're monitored as well. So it's a long process, and these things normally happen one after the other. What they're doing now is trying to contract that whole thing by having some of these stages. They're not missing out any stages, but they're overlapping some of the stages. So that brings the time down. The other thing that we have to bear in mind is that we had some of these vaccines have been informed by our prior experience with other coronaviruses. So SARS, the original SARS coronavirus, and MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. So there were already some vaccines that people were making for those viruses that had gone through some of the steps, and what they've done is modified them. So that shortens things as well. Another major thing that they're doing is in the manufacturing. So instead of waiting for, what they've done is they've pulled together private and public partnerships, and there's these foundations that are working very hard to try and make vaccines available to as many people as possible, regardless of what the economic status of your country. And what they've done is they've brought all these bodies together and are working with the pharmaceutical companies to begin manufacture before approval. So before the vaccine, they've finished. So as they go along, they're always trying to project, is this vaccine going to work? And when they say, we think we have a very good chance, they get the manufacturer to start setting up their factory, because that's a long process as well. So that has been truncated as well. But of course, the vaccine will not go out until it has shown that it is safe. And as the minister said, there's always the case when you move from tens of thousands of people being tested to millions of people, you will find rare effects that you wouldn't have seen before. But that's the way it goes.
Thank you very much.
Hope that answers.
Thank you very much, Professor. 98.1.
Very good Monday morning to the panel, Stephen Cummings, 98.1 FM. My two questions quickly, one for Minister Dayal Singh and the other for Dr. Carrington. Dr. Carrington, I want to press you further. How involved is the University of the West Indies in clinical collaborative studies on not just COVID, but infectious diseases in Trinidad and Tobago? Now, the question comes against the background of the need for research and studies, which are critical elements in us finding solutions and getting basically a response to the COVID-19 issue. And Minister Dayal Singh, I asked the question on the last occasion, and I think it was 48 hours. You said that it was just 48 hours, but I want to go back to that issue of the building out of capacity for the expected inflow of citizens who would be coming into the country in the coming weeks and months. I just wanted to get an idea as to where we are with those, the advancing of those facilities. Thank you.
The second part first, give Dr. Carrington some time to collect her thoughts. So yes, we are expecting, and I'm trying to get the figures here for you now. We are expecting 85 students from Barbados and 127 from Jamaica. So that's 127 and 85, 7, 5, 13, over 200. And we have built out and gone into the University of the West Indies, and we are using their halls. The TTDF is conducting some minor refurbishment and repairs there. So we are working with the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Health, and Dr. Mariam Richards, who has done human service for this country in getting these facilities up and running. She's in charge of that facility, and the expected completion date will be I don't have an exact date, but that is where we are going now. So we have built out over 200 at UWI to accommodate the students coming in.
Ready by Friday.
Yeah, so it should be ready by the end of this week. That's what the CMO has just informed me on. Okay?
Dr. Carrington?
Thank you. So you were asking about how the university is involved in infectious disease research. So the University of the West Indies, one of the reasons that we stand out from the other institutions in the region is our heavy involvement in research. We do research in a wide variety of fields, and infectious diseases is among them. We have been involved in research that has impacted on things like dengue, Zika virus, chikungunya virus, rabies, a variety of animal viruses that affect livestock and wildlife. So there's a broad range of infectious diseases that we look at. And we don't just look at the people who are like myself, who are virologists or molecular biologists and stuff, looking at the virus itself. There's also on the clinical side, there's research on the social impact of these things. So at the moment right now, for example, the Faculty of Medical Sciences has the campus put together, the Faculty of Medical Sciences put together a multidisciplinary group of researchers who are pulling together a variety of projects on COVID-19, and these people come from, not just infectious diseases backgrounds. We have mathematicians, we have, people involved in geography, social sciences, etc., all looking at the problem of infectious diseases. So there is a strong set of research being done. Researchers will always want more to be done. We always need more money to do the research. And one of the ways that we're able to make an impact is, as like researchers elsewhere, is that we collaborate closely with people outside of our region and other institutions. So whatever we don't have and they have, we can work together to get the work done. So there's a lot going on. Obviously, as a virologist, I'd like to see more virology, but there's a lot happening. Thank you.
Thank you. TV6.
Morning, everyone. Urvashi from TV6.
Morning.
Minister Dayal Singh, I think it may be safe to say that Trinidad and Tobago we have created, with the help of health officials, a sort of bubble over the country. Everyone coming into the legal ports, they're subjected to this 14-day quarantine or state supervision. But one of the preliminary points that CAFA made was that illegal immigrants pose a great threat to any country's COVID standing. And of course, the more activity we have, the more relaxation of measures, the greater the impact of any such breach. We did have the interception of 32 Venezuelans. I think 2 weeks ago, our information is that 9 additional illegal immigrants were intercepted after that. And also our information is that illegal immigrants have not stopped coming. Are you satisfied with the measures in place to mitigate this threat? And if you could tell us a little bit about some of those measures.
Okay, so measures to mitigate threats of illegal immigrants will be solely the responsibility of the Minister of National Security. I would not go into that, but he has assured me on this same program here that he has stepped up his patrols, and that is why those 32 and 9 who came in were able to be detained and sent back. But for more information, I suggest you talk to the Minister of National Security.
Okay, Urvashi, I think you have another question. Okay.
Actually, you have many more questions, sports questions as well.
But we'll take one more now.
Thank you. To deal specifically with my second question, the WHO, they have updated their guidance on the wearing of masks. In particular, I noted the fabric masks. Now, they're recommending 3 layers.
She froze up there.
Yes.
Recommending 3 layers.
I think she's frozen. If we probably can go to someone else and come back to TV6. All right, you're on now. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, I apologize. I was just referring to the WHO's guidance that they issued on the wearing of masks. They updated their guidance on fabric masks, I noted in particular. They're saying that there ought to be 3 layers, inner layer, most absorbent, probably cotton, middle layer, filter, and the outer layer, polyester. I'm asking if this policy has made its way into our local policy and if it would be affecting the arrangements with Peel and as well as NIPDEC.
Okay. So I think our arrangements would have predated the WHO guidelines. We were just put out a couple of days ago. I believe it was Friday or Saturday. So the arrangement we have with Peel and with NIPDEC, in terms of the NIPDEC arrangement, they have a quality assurance program which they are sending to the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. Kariri has indicated that for a period of 1 year, they will offer to anyone that is making a mask testing free of charge to determine the efficacy of those masks. So NIPDEC will be going to TTBS and hopefully they will be using Kariri to determine the suitability of the mask before they actually distribute it. So that's the process we are using. There are guidelines coming out of the ministry that would have spoken to the types of materials similar to 3-ply and 4-ply and those kinds of things. The easiest way to make the mask, the types of material to use, the ones that are most suitable, somewhat in alignment with what WHO has put out. There may be subtle variances in terms of the thickness, the types of material, and those sorts of things, but the general principles remain similar to what WHO has put out.
Thank you very much. We move now to CNC3.
Hey, morning everyone. Rishard Khan, Guardian Media.
Morning.
Morning. I have a question for Dr. Carrington. Seeing as we've been speaking about vaccines, in Trinidad and Tobago, there are a number of people who have a bit of an aversion to accepting vaccines, or let's call them anti-vaxxers. Could this have any implications for us as a country if and when that vaccine becomes available, if these persons choose not to vaccinate themselves?
Right. So you're asking about the impact of unvaccinated people. So I'll handle that first. So basically, I mentioned before that when somebody is given a vaccine, they mount an immune response that protects them from infection from the virus. That immune response also, by protecting them, protects them from spreading the virus to others. So in this way, vaccines just don't work on an individual level. They also protect populations, because once you have enough people in a population with immunity against a particular virus, the chance of an infected person seeding an outbreak, so the chance of someone getting infected and then spreading it to other people is very low, because all of the people who have no immunity or the people who are unvaccinated or who are surrounded by people who are. So the virus has to get through all those, it can't get through all those immunized people to reach the unimmunized person. And that whole concept is called herd immunity. Now, you have to have a certain level of people immunized in order to achieve that herd immunity. And there are people who legitimately cannot take a vaccine. You have people who are immunocompromised. They might not be able to have certain types of vaccines. Sometimes they're very young. There's people who are very old. So there's people might be allergic to specific components. So there are people who genuinely cannot take a vaccine. And by everybody else being vaccinated, you're protecting those vulnerable people, newborn babies, they're not vaccinated yet, etc. So herd immunity is important. So when you have a vaccine, you want to have a high level of uptake in order that individuals and the population is protected. Now, the idea, as you said, there are people who don't believe in vaccines. They don't believe vaccines work. All I can say is that there is a mountain of evidence indicating that vaccines work, and they work very, very well. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of fake news saying the contrary, and it is very unfortunate that people are misled by this misinformation. Some of it is very, very convincing in the way that it's presented. And the way that we can get past that is to continue to educate people as best we can so that more and more people understand what vaccination involves, what the benefits are versus the risks, how they outweigh each other, and so we can get as much as the population covered as possible so that we will all benefit.
Let me just support Professor Carrington here. Rishard, what you are speaking about is something called vaccine hesitancy. WHO in 2019, when they listed their top 10 global health challenges, top 10 in 2019, what was listed as one of the top 10 was the issue of vaccine hesitancy. It is a global movement that got a lot of impetus back in, I think, 1990s with Dr. Wakefield, who first came up with this ridiculous claim that MMR vaccines in children cause autism. And unfortunately, let me be careful how I say this, we have some local anti-vaxxers who should know better, even in the parliament. Even in the parliament. So the anti-vaxxers movement is a movement that policymakers like myself have to strenuously fight day in and day out. So I hope that lends some clarity to the issue.
Okay, CNC3?
Yeah, so Minister, I know Dr. Carrington said that this vaccine is quite a while away, but is there anything that we have been putting in place in preparation for this? Or if not, could you at least expound on some of the protocol for getting that vaccine here?
Okay, so any vaccine like this will have to come through PAHO. So when a vaccine is available, depending on the ability of companies to scale up to billions of doses, we will have to work with PAHO as we have been with flu vaccines and all the other vaccines. So to deliver a vaccine, you can't put too many things in place now. For instance, does it need cold chain? Does it not need cold chain? We can't put cold chain in place now if it doesn't need it. So like the regular flu vaccine needs that. What size syringes do we use? What is the site of injection? We just don't know all of these things as yet, but as soon as we know it, we will start to prepare. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Tobago, Channel 5.
Good morning, Kandace Jackson from Tobago Channel 5 News. My question, first of all, is are there any special protocols in place for things like communions and so on when church services are allowed to, and other religious services are allowed to begin? And also, we continue to get calls from persons who are frustrated, not sure what to do with their children as, work returns and there's no daycare or camps or anything like that available for their children to be during the daytime. So it's making it difficult for some of them to go to work and still, be there for their children. So I was just wondering if you could provide some advice to parents in that situation. What are they supposed to do?
Okay, concerning the communion, Dr.
Yeah.
Parasram.
So this guideline, I don't know, this is for places of worship. It's a Ministry of Health guideline that is in final draft, should be ready for circulation tomorrow. Once it's completed and minister signs off on it, we will circulate through the IRO as well as on Facebook, Ministry of Health Facebook, so that everyone is aware of it. We have done some consultation with the major religious bodies so far, but we are trying to get this guideline through the IRO to every sector prior to opening up of the religious places of worship. So in terms of your second question, as it relates to nurseries, I think we handled that on 2 previous occasions. While we empathize with the families and understand the plight, we have to understand we're still in unusual circumstances. This is a pandemic that is existing, and we would like to keep our children as safe as possible. They can't social distance, they can't do all the measures that we have in place. And we really would like any arrangements with children to be held until September, when school is about to reopen, so that the children come out together and we protect them in a safe zone as long as possible.
Yolan Thomas.
Thomas from Caribbean Lifestyle Communications. I have 2 questions. When will supermarkets be allowed to open until 8 p.m., like food establishments, as well as the visitor policy for hospitals? I've been informed that persons are actually going in one at a time rather than one per visit. So I'm understanding that some healthcare professionals are expressing concerns about it.
Okay, so thank you. I will take those 2 questions. The issue of supermarkets opening beyond 8 o'clock, beyond 6 o'clock, is something we will address in the next cycle of opening. I can't give you to say it will happen from so and so date. We are trying to be very careful, and I think it must be appreciated this careful incremental approach has worked brilliantly for Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is one of the few countries that does not have to rebound to their original lockdown positions. So while I understand, sympathize, and empathize with everyone who wants to go back to a total state of normalcy, if we try to do that too fast, the same people we want to have a job, the same businesses we want to keep open may have to end up closing back. So let's take this thing incrementally and wisely, as we have been doing. On the visitor policy, I want to thank you for raising that. And I have a meeting with CEOs. I meet with CEOs every Tuesday morning at 8:30. I will make sure and raise this with them. So thank you for raising that with me. It is one visitor, not one at a time. So thank you for raising that with me.
Guardian Media Limited.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Kevon Felmine Guardian Media. I noted that the CMO said that children cannot practice social distancing, hence the reason for the continued closure of schools. What about tertiary education institutions where they are adults? I know some of the students will be doing examinations at this time, projects, and in July, between July and August, some have short courses. So is there a separate reopening date for these schools? And also, so we are returning to some kind of normalcy, but there is yet to be a vaccine. So what does that mean for healthcare, for instance? Does it mean that the same COVID-19 screening protocols at public health facilities are going to continue until then? Like where once you have a flu symptoms, you have to stay away from work and contact the COVID-19 hotline?
Okay.
So in terms of your first question, so children, it is more difficult for children to social distance than an adult in most instances. In a classroom setting, of course, we're speaking specifically about the exams going ahead in July. So the exams, the Ministry of Health would be working directly with Ministry of Education to work out protocols to ensure that there is social distance. So for instance, in one classroom, there may be 3 or 4 individuals in the entire classroom. Of course, when school reopens, that can't be the case. You're looking at 20 to 30 persons in a small classroom. So social distance is extremely difficult in that sort of setting. We have seen in other countries of the world exams being conducted on a playfield. I saw a picture where South Korea actually using a large playfield to conduct their examinations, which is open air, and they have a lot of social distance occurring in there. We are using classrooms, but we're trying to have 3 or 4 persons in those settings so that the social distance can be adhered to. We're doing hand washing, we're doing sanitization of the surfaces before and after each exam, and every time a new individual comes into a space, that surface has to be cleaned before and after use. So those are our main tenets. And you're speaking about, most importantly, if someone is ill, that they are not allowed to come into the space. That is the most critical one, so that we avoid spreading any viruses during that time.
I promised an answer on calls, so I got some information. Between May 1st and May 22nd, there were 1,000 calls to 2 hotlines. That's the latest data I can get for you. 1,000 calls between May 1st and 21st.
Thank you. TTT?
Good morning, Ian Wason, TTT News. This question will be for either the CMO or the minister. Either one can take it. Since we have begun to reopen the economy, are you satisfied with the number of persons who have been presenting themselves to be tested for COVID-19?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of being satisfied. I prepared some graphs last week. I think I presented them, which showed a significant decline in the number of gastroenteritis, as well as acute viral illness, as well as H1N1 influenza type illnesses over the last month or 2. So it's not a matter of wanting more people to present themselves to be tested. If the numbers continue to remain low because of the public health measures that we have put in place, that is fine. We will continue to test the greatest proportion of those individuals that present to us. However, we expect that as people begin to move, the number of viral illness, for instance, common cold-like illnesses, will increase. And once that increases, we hope that as they present to the facilities, we will continue to increase our community testing, and therefore we will have a larger cohort of persons to test, and we will see, how we go in terms of negative. So it is a matter of testing a significant proportion of the people that are presenting to us is what we're looking at. So whether the numbers remain low or increase, we need to consistently be able to test a large number of those individuals. And I think we have enough tests in the country presently as the numbers increase to continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. I have a response for Verne 91.9 concerning the automatic. He asked about automatic top-up of the food card. Right. The answer is yes, it's automatic. So a total of $1,530 if it is a temporary food card. If it's permanent, they would have already received their top-up. We move to Express now.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi. I basically have I have several questions, but I have 2 quick questions. The first one is for Mr. Dialsing, just a matter of clarity. I know you touched on this matter in May, but members of the horse racing community, that sporting agency, they're claiming that they can start their operations as early as June 19th, as they substantiate their claims by saying they fall under the Ministry of Trade. So I'm just wondering, I know casinos and betting shops, they're to be open on a later date. So I'm just wondering if you can make that clear, especially for those in that community. And the second question can be either for Professor Carrington or Mr. Dialsing. The fastest vaccine that has been developed till now has been 4 years. And I know that you all touched briefly on this before. At best, the predictions are 12 to 18-month program, and the impact when pools are expanded, you will see the potential for greater negative impact. So basically my question, given that you all have touched on it, would be what would be the course of action intended right now for the state? Will we have like a wait and see approach, or when and if the vaccines do come about in that 18-month period, will we be part of that pool, basically?
Okay, so let me take the first question and part of the second one. The Honorable Prime Minister indicated on Saturday that the next round of reopening will be announced on June 20th. I cannot say anything more until then. Let's wait until June 20th when we confer with the Prime Minister again, as we always do, and decide what other aspects of the national economy can be opened up. And I'll now hand over to Dr. Carrington.
What I got from that question, you were talking about the speed at which the vaccine can be created, which I spoke about before. You said that the fastest this has ever been done is 4 years, and we're looking at 12 to 18 months is what people are talking about. In terms of the truncation of the time, I think where there is one of the advantages and one of the reasons they may be able to do it is because there's so much need for it, and people are basically out of necessity working together to get it done. So there's a lot of focus, and they're trying to bring that time down. You then mentioned about, I think you touched on the risks of vaccine. I think if you look at any medication, anything that you use, there's always going to be some sort of small risk associated. What you have to weigh when you do these things is the benefits against the risk. And for the vaccines that we have, and the rigor with which vaccines are tested, that risk is very, very, very small. And as you said, if you have a huge number of people being vaccinated, yes, you probably may see some of that risk appearing, but compared to the benefits, it's vanishing. It's the same way, if you look at it from the other side, the virus itself, if that virus had infected 100 people or 1,000 people and then disappeared, we would never have known of the few people who get, some people get some Kawasaki syndrome or other small side effects. So when you have a large number of people experiencing something, you do see the outliers. But the important thing is that you have a large group of people, the vast majority of people, 99.9%, are responding in the manner that you expect.
Thank you very
I don't know
much.
what more I can say than that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carrington, Dr. Parasram, Minister of Health, members of the media, members of the viewing and listening audience. We have come to the end of today's virtual media conference. Do remember that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Communications are your only credible sources of government information on COVID-19. As we go, here is a reminder of some of the announcements made by Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley on Saturday, as the government relaxes some of the COVID-19 restrictions. Today, hairdressers, barbers, spas, and domestic workers resumed work, while maxis and taxis increased operations from 50 to 75% passenger capacity. Gatherings are now increased from 5 to 10 persons. Religious institutions will be reopened from Thursday, 11th of June 2020. The Prime Minister had originally announced this date as Friday the 12th of June, but advanced it by 24 hours to allow for nationwide celebration of Corpus Christi. I wish to remind you that the CMO will provide guidelines for the resumption of religious services, which will include the need for sanitization and physical distancing. We are also recommending that all gatherings for religious activities be held for 1 hour and that those attending wear masks. On June the 20th, the Prime Minister will announce the next phase, which is expected to start on June the 22nd. Over the next 7 days, approximately 600 to 100 persons will be returning to Trinidad and Tobago. With all these changes coming on stream, it means now, more than ever, we must adhere to the public health guidelines to ensure that we do not lose the gains we have made as a country. Please remember that our next media conference will be held on Wednesday at 2 p.m. I am Donna Cox, Minister of Communications. Thank you for joining us today as the government continues its efforts to keep the curve flattened and beat COVID-19. Stay home, stay safe. May God bless Trinidad and Tobago.
This is TTT. Live for local.